Let's get some more on the climate issue now. With me is the Minister for the Pacific and International Development, Senator Zed Seselja. Minister, thanks so much for your time. You know, our neighbours in the region, this is their number one issue, climate. Have you been making that point known to your colleagues, including the Prime Minister?
Well, it is a big issue, you're right, and I regularly have discussions with Pacific colleagues, and of course climate change is one of the important issues that does come up pretty regularly. And certainly our PM is very aware of the concerns in the Pacific, and he's very committed to taking effective action on climate change. And one of the things we discuss is not just what Australia has been doing in being well ahead of the OECD average when it comes to reducing our emissions, but also the very strong targets we're taking forward, and we're going to meet and beat them, 50% per capita by 2030, and of course what the Prime Minister has had to say in relation to net zero going forward, about a commitment to get there as soon as possible and preferably by 2050. So yeah, there's no doubt there's a good story to tell, but also in the Pacific, I think the other thing that comes up is how we're responding. So we respond globally. We respond in terms of our own emissions reductions, but we also respond by supporting our Pacific neighbours, and we're doing that with resilience projects. We're doing that with helping them to transition to renewable energy. So we've got some great projects in the Pacific that we're supporting. The Tina River hydro power in the Solomons being one headline like that. And it goes to this discussion about what is the pathway forward, and one of the key pathways is better technology, right? That developing nations in the Pacific and elsewhere won't reduce their emissions and transition their energy until it's in their economic and environmental interest to do so.
That's all well and good and to be commended when we can work with other countries on technology. But the other thing that the Pacific nations want, we heard from the Prime Minister of Samoa last week saying that Australia needs to be more ambitious in terms of its medium-term goal. They want targets.
Indeed, and we are being ambitious, and look, let's wait and see exactly what we say in relation to 2050. That'll be a matter for the Prime Minister and for Angus Taylor, but the Prime Minister is...
What about the midterm, 2030, 2035? Because there's a suggestion, Andrew Clennell reporting today, that it's going to be a projection, not a target. That won't fly, will it, for a lot of world leaders?
Let's wait and see, but what I would say in terms of ambition, that 2030 target is 50% per capita. So if you compare that to virtually every other developed nation, 50% per capita is right up there. So not only are we doing far more than the OECD average at the moment in terms of the last 15 or so years since 2005, we're double the OECD average in terms of what we've actually achieved. So we've got the runs on the board, but then going forward to cut your emissions in half on the current targets per person is a hell of an effort, and so that is ambitious. But obviously, I'll allow Angus Taylor to, set out the details along with the Prime Minister going forward.
Will the projections, will that be enough though? Because as you know, and you've said again today, your colleagues in the Pacific have been saying to you, they want us to be a leader in terms of ambition when it comes to the targets.
Well, and there are two aspects, and I say this to my Pacific colleagues, and I say this to you, Kieran. There are two aspects. There's getting the job done, which we are, well ahead of the OECD average. Then there is being ambitious going forward. And at the moment, on the table, regardless of anything else we say or do, on our Paris targets is a 50% per person reduction in emissions by 2030. I know that's only 9 years away. Now we're meeting and beating our 2020 targets. We anticipate we'll meet and beat our 2030 targets. I'll leave Angus Taylor to talk about any updates that he may want to give on that. But what we've put forward right now is ambitious, and what we are doing is actually well ahead of most developed nations.
What do you say to your Nationals colleagues who are worried that ambition, if you are ambitious about it, as you argue, will cost jobs?
Well, we've always taken the approach that we do it in a way that doesn't increase taxes, because we're a party of lower taxes, and we've delivered that and we've demonstrated that. But we do it through new technologies. That is the way that you protect jobs. That is the way that you get buy-in here in Australia and around the world. You don't do it by, as say the Greens might want, in shutting down the coal industry overnight. That's not the way to deliver, and no country takes that kind of approach. What you do is you sensibly build on the policies you've got, you get investments in new technologies, and you continue to trade on our strengths while doing things in a smarter and better way. And Angus Taylor has set that out very well with the technology roadmap.
Do you feel, I mean, I know you represent Canberra, and it's probably one of the more progressive electorates in in the country, but do you feel there's been a shift in the public opinion on this issue?
Well, I think the public has always wanted us to be doing the right thing by the environment, and that includes action on climate change. What they've also wanted is that we do it in a way that is sensible, that doesn't kill or damage the Australian economy in order to do that. And we've always pursued those dual goals, and I think the Australian public is still very much there. Yes, they want to see continued ambition on reducing emissions. They want us to do our bit in conjunction with the rest of the world, but they want us to do it in a smart way. And the Prime Minister makes this point, and it's very relevant around the world, is that until the technologies of the future, the low emissions technologies are made affordable, the rest of the world, and particularly the developing world, won't take them up. They will do what is in their economic interest, particularly as they develop, just as Australia did. And so the way we get Australia on board and the rest of the world on board is not by punitive taxes, it is actually by developing the technologies of the future.
Given the tortured politics around this, though, are you nervous until you see the deal done with the Nats?
Well, look, these are always challenging things. There's no doubt about it. And we see this, right across the board. We've seen Labor tear themselves apart on these issues. Yes, it's challenging. Yes, there are robust views on these things. I think what all members of the coalition believe is that we should do our bit. We should do things that are good for the environment, good for the planet, but we all believe that you should do it while protecting jobs and growing the economy. And that's actually what enables you to respond to some of the challenges that inevitably will be there with climate change, regardless of what actions are taken by the world in the coming years.